So another thing that is important in astrology is the so-called aspects. But me personally, I don't put so much emphasis on aspects as many other astrologers. That might be false, that might be better, I don't know. But I've experienced that when you make deep analysis with meaningful sentences, being knowledgeable about the keywords of the archetypes, being able to discriminate the levels, to say the house is the room in which it happens, the house is the stage where it happens. So it is the childhood, the fourth house. It is my emotional inner self. It's my inner child. Then you will not do flaky statements or do the mistake as many others. They do grass-hopping analysis. They say, oh, your Mars is there, and and that, but they don't say anything. It's just a show off of like some terminology that the client does not understand. But yes, aspects are important, but they are not the most important as many astrologers seem to believe. And basically, aspects, there's always an eternal discussion about among astrologers, because, a 90-degree angle, which is like this, a 90-degree angle is, of course, exact when it's 90 degree. But is it still a 90-degree angle when it's like 3 degrees off, like 87 or 93? And especially in Germany, they have endless discussions. But everything flows. Winter does not come with a day and spring does not either. So for me, it is more important that we understand the kind of like core energy of certain aspects, and you decide how you work with them or not. If you want to get deeper into the aspects, I would highly, highly recommend that you get into another teaching behind aspects, which are the phases. They're based on the Chaldaic knowledge from like ancient times of the 28 moon phases, which were then broken down into 8 main or primary phases, which were described first by Dan Rudyard, a great astrologer, wonderful guy. I mean, brilliant. There's no other word than brilliant. By the way, he was only able to write his books when he was on a train, because he had Mercury, which is god of writing, in Sagittarius, which is traveling. So he booked like a train from like the East Coast to the West Coast and back. You also find those phases described in the books of Jeffrey Green, and you also find them in my book. But I've decided to not do it here in the video class, because experience has shown that almost no astrology student applies them, even though they have a depth within it. But the main aspects is basically very simple. If 2 planets are together, we call that conjunction. The astrological symbol you see here in the background. Conjunction is Mrs. Venus is sitting on the lap of Mr. Saturn. So that is called a conjunction, Venus-Saturn conjunction. Yeah. So 2 planetary rulers of 2 signs, or Venus having 2 signs as rule, so are now combined. Venus and Saturn, we need to combine these 2 index cards, and that usually happens also somewhere in a house and in a sign, right? So we need that. But we start always with house. What's the sign level? We get to that, the steps that I've explained. Then you don't get like over analytically confused about, what is more important? All the astrologers say, you have a Venus-Saturn conjunction, you have a Venus-Saturn conjunction. Well, you have a Venus-Saturn conjunction, so what? Yeah. You can even, like, if you get confused by aspects, especially by conjunctions, you can help yourself as a beginner. If you really go like, what does it mean? Like Venus, Saturn, what does it mean? Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn. So just use your index card. This is just, use your index card and take one for the Venus, which is Taurus and also Libra, and take the other one just of Capricorn instead of Saturn. Same energy. Put them together, make meaningful sentences, and you're able to describe what it means. Yeah? So that really helps. So, one thing I do have to mention, which has to do with the phases. Phases, like the moon phases. We know that when the moon is exactly with the sun, so a moon-sun conjunction or sun-moon conjunction, we have the so-called new moon. We don't see the moon in the sky because it's like absorbed by the sun's halo. Sun's halo. Anyway. But there's a difference. If the sun, there's a difference if like the moon is still applying the sun. Meaning, if this would be the sun, and if I, the moon, I'm still coming to sit on the lap of the sun, exact new moon. Or if me, the moon, has already like gone away and go into separation from that exactness or exactitude. I know how to write it, but I don't know how to pronounce it. So there is actually a difference because based on the sun-moon cycle, if this is the sun, the moon is like in a conjunction and it starts with a new moon, a new cycle, half moon, like crescent half moon, full moon, it's the waning one. This is the waxing one, this is the waning one. That's right. So it's the waning moon. So basically when the moon or any other planet goes close to the exact conjunction, it is finishing up a cycle. And that's interesting because for the most astrologers, let's say the Saturn-Venus, if we look at two planets which form an aspect, one is always the slower one. That's the one that we take as point of reference, right? Except the sun. Like the sun is the point of reference in our solar system. So therefore, let's say we would have Saturn, which takes about 28, 29 years through the zodiac, conjunct the sun, you would say, well, Saturn is slower. Yeah, but the sun is the center of our solar system. So there is a difference if the planets, we take the slower one, let's say the sun, there's a difference if the moon is still going into the new moon, which means it is ending a cycle. This little phase, ending a cycle, we call balsamic phase. And that is utterly, utterly important to know. Because it is a difference of almost 360 degrees. If a planet, in regards to the slower one, the one on the basis, the point of reference, or the sun, is finishing up a cycle or has already begun a new cycle, meaning is separating away from the conjunction. That's a difference of almost 360 degrees. Make sense? That's really important because, for instance, if there's a conjunction, exact is of course 0 degree. They really sit thigh on, butt on thigh. But if it's an inch off, you should really discriminate. Is the faster planet already moving away from the slower one? Because then the inherent energy behind that aspect, i.e. the phase, is a new phase. We already learned that new things want to be explored and have a certain kind of like a insecurity, but also a need to have freedom to try things out. Make sense? So let's say we would have Mars, Venus, which are also indicators for how to initiate relationships. Not only intimate ones, but how to initiate relationships. If Mars is the slower planet because it's further away from the sun, if Mars is on the very basis and the Venus is a little off Mars' lap, meaning in the new phase, then this person is basically in a phase of initiating relationships of any kind with no concept, purely instinctive, purely new. Make sense? Right? Like after our lunch break, you will probably come back and everyone will probably sit at the same chair. Why? Because that what was before new has now become yours. right? And it gives you a sense of security. But that Venus-Mars person would not have an idea, you know. So it needs a lot of freedom. Make sense? But regular astrology would call that a conjunction. And it's right, it is a conjunction. But it is a new phase conjunction, total different energy. Whereas the opposite, let's say the Venus would, the faster planet, would go slowly into the conjunction. That means the person / the soul is cleaning up a whole cycle regarding relationships from many lifetimes. So this person has rather feeling, oh, here it comes again. Here it comes again. We can rather say that every person, that person with a Venus-Mars conjunction in a balsamic phase, meaning ending a circle, every person this person is interacting with in this life, and any relationship pattern, Venus, it is experiencing, is nothing but repeating what is unresolved from the past with that other person from past lives in one intention, to purify from attachments, anger, compulsiveness, whatever, to I call that phase the Buddha phase. Meaning, things, I always say, Buddha sits on a mountain and meditates and smiles. A rain cloud comes, he smiles. The rain cloud rains, he smiles. The rain cloud leaves, he smiles. So when you have conjunctions with a balsamic phase, that's really important. It is important, especially for the client. If you would have a person with this Venus running into Mars, balsamic phase, and you go, listen, often in this life you really experience relationship dynamics that have a lot to do that you have the feeling, I know it. The intention is your soul wants to kind of like clean the hard drive from unresolved files. That in the past you said, no, I don't want to deal with that. Now they come back. Yeah? So if you have an attitude, this comes in order to go, and you do not react in the old habit as your subconscious might want you to get into, then you will find a peace in regard of relationship. And then you come to the real level of relationship, because there's only one relationship possible, because there's only one love, and that's the one what the balsamic phase holds, which is the divine, the God. So there you see, it's really a difference. Yeah? If conjunction, please discriminate if you can. If it is a new phase, you always take the slower planet as the point of reference, or the sun. Yeah? And if the quicker one is moving away already, or still running into, forming an exact conjunction. Yeah? But in both cases, a conjunction in general is like combining the energies, right? Saturn with his winterish, strict, earthy yin cardinal, and the Venus with its Taurian and Libra beauty and sensuality, if they conjunct, yeah, it can become a very solid form, or a person that knows exactly, feels exactly what is good for me and what not, with clear boundaries, that needs time to just sit. So you can combine everything from the archetypes. The next other one is the opposition, compared with the full moon. Now we have the greatest tension possible in a circle. We have 0 degree and 180 degree. Well, when something is 180 degree, like this camera, opposite me, that's why this aspect is called opposition. When something is directly opposite of you, the opposite is able to see you full blown. I mean, it's it's the highest tension and also the highest polarization possible, which has an enormous tension. And as in the zodiac, what we will hear, 180 degrees after Aries, like 0 Aries, 180 degrees later, the sign of Libra starts, right? The fall, or the autumn equinox. So as Libra has a tendency to go through extremes, planets that have an opposition have also, like the 180 degree archetype, which is like Libra, a tendency to go through the extremes, right? It's, especially in young years, very often an either or. But this tremendous tension within consciousness reflected in this opposition in the chart is the invitation to expand consciousness, to transform the either or into a as well as. That's the whole trick. I have a Moon-Saturn opposition, yeah, which means a lot of things. Like Moon could be private, Saturn can be business. Yeah. So there's always like either completely private or completely business. But as older as I become, I see, oh, it's just like, it's just balanced. Yeah. So an opposition is the call for balance, right? Now the halfway to the opposition would be 90 degree. If you want to refer to the moon, of course, we have two 90 degrees. We have the first 90 degree, the waxing moon. That's the growing one, right? The waxing moon. And later 270 degree from the slower point, yeah, the waning one. So with the squares, you can do the same thing. But basically, what a square means, a 90 degree angle. And the astrological symbol for it is just like, a square. Right now, I'm standing in a 90 degree angle to the ground, which is tremendous tension for my calves, for my brain, right? For the whole skeleton and muscular and nervous system. It's constantly correcting to be able in this position. So it is tension. But it's not like astrologers very often say, oh, a square is a bad thing. No, it's not. There's nothing wrong with tension, right? It enables me, due to the tension, that I can make action, either in this way, or in that way, or in this way, or in this way. So squares are basically the tension that bring us the ability to bring things into action. Make sense? So these are like major aspects. Then we have another aspect which some astrologers favor, which is the 120 degree angle. If you divide the 360 degree circle into 3, you have a triangle. So it's a triangle, 120 degree. 120 degree, if you come from 0 Aries and you go 120 degree further, you come to the beginning of Leo. Right? From Aries, you come to Leo, 1/3 of the year. So of course, like Leo, the trine, the 120 degree angle, which is a triangle, usually in blue because it's a harmonious one, not a tension one. If I stand like in 120 degree, leaned against the wall, I'm quite cool, I'm chilled, but I have no tension. I might have a lot of creative energy. And I've seen many charts with people that have great trines, but not enough tension to get them into action. They're just like, ooh, I'm so Leonian, I'm so good. Yeah? Whereas like people in Berlin say, Berlin, capital of Germany, which is completely flat. I mean, there's not even a hill. They have one hill, but that's only the debris from the Second World War. They made a mountain. So it's, it's just flat, right? But they say, and that's typical Berlin, they stand like this. If we would have mountains, they would be higher than the others. Sometimes, a trine can bring this kind of like Leonian kind of like, it's good, I don't need to do anything. So, the tension, especially of the squares, is really helpful. Half of a 120 degree is 60 degree, and that's called a sextile. We see the symbol in the back. It's like a little 6 star. So a sextile is kind of like a small trine. It is as pleasant, it is very creative, but it can bring a lot of harmonious energy naturally, not via tension like the opposition, but just harmoniously. For instance, if someone has Mercury sextile Venus, which happens quite often because the planets cannot go too far away, these people have a very beautiful voice, or they have a ability to word things very beautifully, or they write in a very elegant way, because the beauty of the love goddess of Venus gets into the communication god, so that's very beautiful. But sometimes the sextile can also be a little bit of a lazy aspect, not like the Berlin guy, but still like lazy, like manana. And one more aspect, and then we have like these until now are the classical astrological aspects, the so-called Ptolemaic aspects. Traditional astrology works with them primarily. There's one aspect that is the only one where you should not have too much so-called orb, like, 1 + 2 degree. It shouldn't be more than like maximum 2 degrees, meaning like 2 degrees applying, to be exact, and 2 degrees separating. And that one is called inconjunct. And it's a 150-degree angle. Angle, not ankle, angle. And 150 degree is quite crooked. Or if we again come from the point of reference from 0 Aries, the spring, and we go 150 degree, we pass Leo at 120 and we come to the beginning of Virgo. Virgo is mutable, earth, yin. It's the garden that is not only a thought to change and to rearrange, but we have to do it. So it has to do with a consciousness of, I would like to call it crises. Not big crises, but let's say you come home and you're so hungry for your yogurt, that you've been buying 2 weeks ago. You're like, oh, I need this yogurt. You look like, it expired. You go like, oh, I can eat it. No, right? That brings you quite a crisis, right? Now, the crisis triggers that you need to take care of worldly issues more properly, more awarely. Make sense? It's not the end of the world if your yogurt is like, bad, but it can annoy you. So that aspect has a lot to do with a certain annoyance. It is if it's in a natal chart, very often also an aspect where most likely, or very likely, health issues might be subject to indication of crises in order to adjust and correct attitudes from past lives that were not correct. Not in judgmental ways, but if I want to have yogurt, I better buy like fresh one, right? Or I take care to eat them before they are bad. So sometimes when you have really health issues, like also like medicine would call it medical issues, but it can be chronic issues, you find inconjuncts. But please do not more than 2 degrees before, 2 degrees after. Because close by is another aspect, which I will not get into that. It's called the biquintile, which is a great creative aspect, and many astrologers don't work with that one, but biquintiles are really great. So the inconjunct, the 150-degree angle, I usually draw in green. So I have like the conjunction, the square, and the opposition in red to see its tension. There's action, right? There's imbalance. I have the trine and the sextile in blue, which shows me it is more of a natural, nice flow, but it could probably be a little bit lazy. And the inconjunct in green. The inconjuncts, if you see them in transit, let's say you have like moon is quite quick, so we don't have to talk about that. But let's say Mars would make an inconjunct to your moon or to your Pluto in the chart, which would be a thing about like maybe 3 or 4 days. But it can be so annoying, especially when Mars is in operation. Mars is very restless. The Aries. So it could be really so annoying. But the thing is, and that you can't do much against it. It's like, you can't do anything that the yogurt is like expired. You just have to, deal with the reality. I call this 150-degree inconjunct angle in transits, like in operations, right now, mosquito aspect. It's like a mosquito at night in the summer. It's not life-threatening, but boy, can you lose your temper, right? And you can't do anything. You can throw the cushions and on the light and swear words and all that. You lay down, you think you killed this beast, and so it's a mosquito aspect. Usually fades away quickly, especially with like fast-moving planets. But these are the main aspects that you want to have like a focus on. So basically, that's like the preparation, and now we will get into the archetypes.
Your mind.
Remember times without time.